Hello. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about an organization called Hindus for Human Rights. It sounds wonderful. In fact, there is. I remember maybe 20 years ago, I came across an organization, I think, with the same or similar name, and it was, I think, based in here in London, and they were doing very good work drawing attention to the violation of the human rights of Hindus in different countries. And I think it was a little bit, I think perhaps what motivated it was when the Taliban came to power in Afghanistan. And I vividly remember, the plight of especially the Sikhs in Afghanistan. And in fact, where I live, shortly afterwards, or around about that time, um, these very enterprising people they were Sikhs from Afghanistan, and they set up a little furniture shop. Not so little, it was, and I imagine that it was with help from, their own community, the Sikh community, and with other people. And my point is that it's good to have a such organizations, which would uh, look at the human rights of minorities and lobby for them. And if you look at the Ismailis, I remember in East Africa, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was Prince Sadruddin Aga Khan at the time, exactly the time when Idi Amin was expelling the Asians. So, and I think they by looking at their specific needs and helping them, there was a remedy for the violation of their human rights. So I'm all for. I think that any particular group, they know they are human beings, but they are human beings who know each other better on the basis of something common, something shared. A common, what is called oikeiosis. In Greek, the word oikeiosis means the human propensity to cluster together with people like yourselves, people you're related to, people that you share things in common. And very often it's your own people. They will be able to see that something which is a human right is being violated. Whereas somebody of a different culture, they may not see it that way. They may say, well, we all do things this way. Why don't you just do things this way? If we are all praying in such and such place, why can't you also pray over here? But it's the essence of humanity that there are, differences which those who actually have that trait, they can appreciate it and they can say, no, look, this guy isn't making a fuss. It really is true. It's like, let us say, let me be very frank with you. I mean, if I don't really care greatly about vegetarianism and so forth. But I remember there was a white guy who came to visit me, and he was sitting where I was sitting now. I knew he was a vegetarian, and I had prepared, and there was some vegetarian food. And, he was start to eat, and then he suddenly said, look, there's meat in it. I said, no, there's no meat in it. Then I said, yes, but did you cook it in a separate pan from a meat item? Or an egg, I think it was eggs, I think that he mentioned. And suddenly, of course, it's because I am Hindu, and I remember, my own mum and the sort of feelings that a lot of Hindus have in this regard. And I imagine, this guy, he kept going to India. I could never understand. He'd go in summer. I'd be going, no, don't go in summer, go in winter. He was mad. Ultimately had to be sectioned. But I never, but okay, as a Hindu, I could marginally appreciate what he was on about. That I think you see people, it is, I mean, a non-vegetarian, a person whose religion permits non-vegetarianism, they would say, what's wrong with you? Why are you making a fuss? There must be, But then when you realize that there's a large group of people, they've been brought up in that way, and it is the essence of humanity, that of our species, that we do have these differences. It would be like a white person who's never seen a black before. Suppose a white person kept giving me soap and saying, "Your face is very, very black. Must be dirty." But then, you can, once that person realizes that there's a large body of black people, in fact, black people are the majority on the planet, or darker skinned people. Human beings can be like that. Okay, so there's a human right to have an immunity. If you're actually brown skinned or black skinned, you don't have to go washing yourself. So, as I say, it is a good thing if people having a common trait, whether they're maybe to do with gender, sexuality, something else, whatever it may be, for them to have a group and to campaign for the human rights of their own group, wherever they see them being violated. Unfortunately, in Scroll India today, or just yesterday, I saw an article by something called an organization which I think apparently it's headed by Rajgopal and Sunita Vishwanath, and they're the co-founders of Hindus for Human Rights .org USA. So these are two Americans living in America. I imagine that they're from my part of the world and belong to to a caste similar to mine, and to have in the case of Sunita Vishwanath, I know similar background. I think she is married to a Jewish gentleman, and I'm not married to a Jewish gentleman. I do want to emphasize that. But there's hope. Hope springs eternal. Hope springs eternal to the human breast. So it turns out, when I looked at their website, that these Hindus for Human Rights, they have never ever done anything for Hindus who have suffered any human rights violation. Instead, they tell stupid lies. They say that in Delhi, though there was a pogrom, there was a massacre, where the state sends in Cossacks and they kill and people of a particular religion, and nothing of the sort happened. There was an attack to coincide with Trump's visit. To India, there was an attack on policemen and on innocent non-Muslims by Muslims, and it was orchestrated, it was planned, it was political. But the police really did nothing. And the reason they did nothing is because the police chief in Delhi, he was useless. Previously, the lawyers had beaten the police, and he had prevented the police from retaliating. So they're demoralized. And, the fact is that when a policeman is killed, at the time of the Babri Masjid riots, there was an IPS officer with his in charge of a group of policemen, and they confronted a mob, and one of the constables was knifed. He was killed by a Muslim. Immediately, IPS officer gave shoot to kill orders. They killed 19-20 people. I forget the exact number. But because of that shooting, there was no more rioting in Delhi. That's it. There was rioting in Bombay, there was here, there. But, if the police take a robust action once one of their own are killed, if they shoot, then there is no rioting, there is no pogrom. It's just a case of you kill a cop, and immediately you get shot, and then nobody wags their tail. But in this case, police were demoralized, they did nothing. And then, of course, you see the majority has no difficulty killing and raping and, we know that. We know that the biggest ethnic cleansing in Delhi happened under Pandit Nehru. He was powerless to do anything about it. And when things settled down a little bit, and in 1948, a few hundred, not very many, Muslims of Delhi, they returned from Lahore. They'd run away to Lahore and they came. And they were good people, they were well off. But immediately, the Constituent Assembly, including Nehru, including Rajaji, including Ambedkar, including all the bloody Gandhians who were still around, they immediately passed a law saying that Muslims can't return. They have to get a clearance, and basically, if their property has been claimed, or if they really, or if there's any, the local authority has to certify that we want them back. So immediately, right in 1948, it was from then that the policy was implemented that non-Muslims fleeing Pakistan immediately get citizenship. They don't just get citizenship, they can stake a claim against Muslim property and the custodian of evacuee property. He'll give them, they say basically, look, I lost a cinema hall in Karachi, and there's a cinema hall here owned by a Muslim. So then they'll find out that some brother or cousin has run away, and make the allegation, which might be completely baseless. They'll say, no, it's an ancestral property, and that cousin or that nephew or that cat or that dog which ran away, give us that share. And of course, once the refugees come, they'll bring a whole bunch of them because they had nothing. So you'll be harassed, you'll be in a horrible position, and you just sell up or try to sell up. But many, many Muslims were pushed out, even in the 50s, even in the 60s. Salman Rushdie's father, if you read Midnight's Children, Rushdie was very pro-Indian. If I'd been him, I'd have bloody rubbed the faces of the Indians into their hypocrisy, because they went on pretending, we are all angels, Mahatma Gandhi, only Muslims are bad. It was completely false. Except in Bengal, where in Bengal there was hardly any ethnic cleansing of Muslims. And Bangladeshi writers, Muslim writers in New York, NYT, they have affirmed that there was economic migration, there was no forcible movement, as there was. There was in Delhi, there was in Bihar, there was in Jammu, of course, very much so. Punjab, of course, East Punjab. Are you kidding me? Which is not to say that any of these people harbored any hatred, nothing of the sort. On the contrary, But it's economics, and land is scarce. So, the fact is that the moment Mahatma Gandhi and Rajaji, basically they said yes to partition. Jinnah said yes to it. And these guys were lawyers. They knew what had happened after the Treaty of Lausanne. They knew there was going to be an exchange of population. But they were too bloody lazy to make sure that it was done in a smooth manner. So, and there's a legacy of bitterness from that. But it's very remarkable that many of the people affected, Punjabis, Sindhis, it's very remarkable that they blame the administration. They don't blame their former neighbours, not at all, because it wasn't them. But, as I say, this was an administrative, if you have partition, then you should have orderly exchange of population. It was doable, but administration was lazy as shit, corrupt as shit, completely rubbish. Kamala Harris's father, he was part of the Sorry, I beg your pardon. I thought I hadn't turned on the switch. I've been wasting my time. So, Kamala Harris's father, he was part of that. And, he saw, that was Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. She was, I think probably that's why Kamala Harris has the name Kamala, because Kamala is a really boring name. We weren't giving names like Kamala when she was born, because it's such a boring name. But I think it's because of Kamala Devi. She was a very glamorous figure. Anyway, the fact is it was horribly mismanaged. And if I were of, one of those people who have done extremely well in Delhi, I would bloody hate the government of India, and the administration. But, they put up with it. They didn't really show bitterness. But they did. A lot of them did join Jansan. That is a fact. And RSS really was quite helpful to them. So that is the historical reason that though the ethnic cleansing was carried out by Congress, Mahatma Gandhi himself said, when he went to Bihar, he said, I know exactly which of you Congress chappies has been killing. They were literally butchering completely innocent Muslims. There was no retaliation, nothing of the sort. It was just catch a few of them, kill them. The others will run away. Very cynical. And Gandhi should have known that, because when he first came to Champaran, why was he brought in? The history books won't tell you. But just look up Wikipedia and you'll notice that he comes in at exactly the same time when the Hindus were attacking Muslims and forcing them to give up beef, cow slaughter. And basically, the upper class Biharis didn't actually eat beef. It was more a middle class, lower middle class demand. So, the guys at the top had no difficulty. They said, look, in our jagirs, we've been banning not just killing of cows, but also killing of peacocks, killing of monkeys. You ask the Nawabs of Pataudi, one of the younger brother of the great, not Saif's grandfather. So that uncle, or great uncle, he was an Islamist, he was a general in Pakistan. But he says in his memoir, he told me, frankly, and he explained to me in triplicate, in great detail, that you see the upper class weren't consuming beef. They actually had a preference. Of course, they were of Turkish or Afghan origin, and their favorite would be, venison, deer, goat, that kind of thing. Beef was cheap, and beef was basically, in India, it's associated with the people who skin the cow and who then gain the what's called fallen cattle. So, but you see, there is huge violence in Bihar at exactly the same time that Gandhiji is turning up for Champaran, indigo. And that's because there were some white indigo factors. But they didn't own the land. They were leasing. And the fact is that, as Rajendra Prasad says, that all the complaints were bogus. Prasad doesn't say they are bogus. He says that, of course, it was not the case that every single peasant had been beaten and had been locked up in a stinky place, in a latrine, or this or that. In other words, none of them, it hadn't happened to any of them. All that had really happened is that they had not bothered to sign some particular thing and pay a little bit of money under the lease, under the tenancy agreement, because they knew that price of indigo was not commercial, price was too low. They hadn't bargained on the First World War, which put up the price of indigo. So basically, like with most agitations, it was all based on lies. White man wasn't really sucking the blood of the poor, innocent brown man. But they were doing something very much worse. And I've explained this in many of my books. That you see, it wasn't true that the British came and robbed India of its wealth, because India was as poor as shit. Except for the rich people who remained rich and got richer because the British were around. There's no income tax, nothing. I mean, there was during the war and so forth, but it was pretty low. So you can't really rob very, very poor people of wealth because they have none. Now, there's some complicated theory which Utsa Patnaik has come up with, which says, oh, they were distorting the exchange rate. But you see, you can't distort the exchange rate if there is a free convertibility of gold. If you can import and buy and sell gold, bring it in, send it out, there is no exchange control regime. So then manipulating exchange rate is meaningless. True, for the industrialists, there was some issue, but that's a different matter. I mean, there was a good reason why they were paying money to Gandhi. But fundamentally, it came down to, if you produce Indian cloth and you've got a nutter who goes around saying burn all the foreign cloth, you're getting rid of the competition because it's being burnt. So that's why you pay Gandhi, who's a nutter, but he is very good with money. And non-violence means money. Either you get something through through violence, or you pay for it. That's it. Non-violence is money. Farmers' agitation, why did it work? Because it's well financed. It's money. And in fact, farmers' agitation has made a profit for the overall. You can't say the people, because they got a good minimum support price. And of course, for ticket, it's a ticket to, we don't know, but it looks like he and Chaudhry Charan Singh's grandson. So these two dynasts, that it looks as though they may be able to do well in the next year, the assembly elections. Let's see, we don't know. Anyway, my point is that that you see the real way in which British exploited the very poor Indians was sexually. Viceroy would come and perform fellatio and cunnilingus upon all the poor people of India, thus sapping Indian people, not the rich people, not the zamindars and the barristers and so on, but the poor working people of India. They were subjected to incessant fellatio. That means their sperm was being extracted, their vital essence was being extracted. And cunnilingus, don't forget cunnilingus. But naturally, after the departure of Viceroy, when this type of terrible exploitation was no longer being done, natives did get restive. They became dissatisfied, and ultimately they turned against great dynasties like that of Janayadari, Rahul Panditji. Congress says that he's a Dattatreya Gotra. The Gotra can only be inherited from the father, and it can't be inherited from grandmother. But you see, Rahul is right that he is a Hindu because he says he's a Hindu. And he is Roman Catholic because his mummy is the Pope. And you see, this is the problem with people claiming to be Hindu. It's, if you say, I'm a Catholic because the Pope is my mother, Catholics will say, well, no woman has been Pope, and certainly no woman with a son or a daughter of your complexion and your type exists. So what you're saying is inherently false. So similarly, the claim to be a Brahmin or to speak for Hindus, it's a nonsense if, you're actually sitting in America married to Jewish gentlemen, and that's not a particularly, that, I mean, it's something that a person can do, but it's not a particularly Hindu thing to do. It's not a characteristic of a trait associated with higher addition to Hindu values. Of course, you may say, well, you see, the true Hindu is very truthful, which is why I'm telling lies. It's a lie. The true Hindu is a Hindu, just as the true Scotsman is actually Scottish. It's no good saying the true Scotsman, is truthful, and therefore anybody who tells a lie is not Scottish. This is nonsense. You're truly Scottish if you actually come from Scotland, and that's it. So the human rights, the Hindus for human rights, it appears that they are concerned with Muslims, and that's the only thing they're concerned with, and they're concerned with blackening the name of the BJP. Fine, that's political. So, but they're not. What is motivating them is not Hinduism. They're claiming to be Hindu. They want to be acting as Hindus, but this is rather like Rahul claiming to be the Kshatriya Gotra. But why not claim to be that your mother is the Pope, and that's why you're Catholic? It's the same thing. It's just a lie. And the final point I'd really make is that it does make sense for people who share a particular trait, and to point out that human rights violations can occur unconsciously, or through systemic bias, or through for some other reason. That's something which arises purely out of the fact that human beings show some phenotypal diversity, which is necessary. It's a driver for the evolution of our species. It's like homosexuality. We know that from the point of view of mathematical biology, game theoretic biology, we know that there must be some people who will be homosexual. It's not some perversion or something created by culture. This is a scientific theory we have. And in any case, you can make, without any scientific theory, you can say, look, here's a large group of people, look at them, they're human beings. So they can't all be perverts and all be strange. No. So it's fine to have organizations like Hindus for human rights, and they can work with gays for human rights, or and so forth, and that there can be a lot of collaboration. And of course, when it comes to problems between two different communities, if each accepts the rights of the other, and for example, if there had been population exchange which had been properly administered, then there's no real problem. There is a problem, but it is minimized, and something better can come off it. On the other hand, the claim made by the Hindus for human rights is that if you're a Hindu, then basically you have to provide the remedy for the rights violation of anybody else, any non-Hindu. But there is no reciprocity involved in that. So, but this is, they're misusing the word right. A right is something legal, and it is associated with Hofeldian incidents, as Hofeld analyzed, what are rights, what are duties, and he found that there are some incidents. There's like an immunity, so that analysis has to be there, and that can be. And when you make a claim that, look, these are my rights, and the other obligation holders as well, then I also have these rights, and let's make this adjustment. And so then you can have transactions which are legitimate, which are what are called Pareto efficient, in the sense that you quickly, within a few iterations, you can eliminate the sort of problems which are associated with an administered solution. In other words, through trading, the government doesn't have to do every single thing. Doesn't have, you can have a lot of trading, and then the administration enforces it. So it's a solution, and this is really the heart of the whole law and economics approach. And what is significant about law and economics, this is the causes theorem. And causes theorem is very useful because it says, look, who owns what isn't what really matters. Because what we have in practice is incomplete contracts, and incomplete contracts are renegotiated as you go along. So it doesn't really matter who owns what. What matters is that you can have mutually beneficial transactions, and the law only comes in, and the administrative arm or the coercive arm of the state, it only comes in at the last, or not even then. Another way to put it is through the fourth theorem of repeated games, the Meyerson feasibility theorem, which is, Meyerson got the Nobel Prize for it. So these are ideas which are well understood, but not by bloody worthless cretins like Rajgopal and Vishvanathan. And they've written some real nonsense in Scroll. It's an open letter to the Hindus, basically saying bend over, bend over and spread your cheeks, And Modi is so evil, oh my God. OMG, it is Hitler. It's just nonsense. Now, I personally think that human rights, that whole, it's been bullshit, and it's going to die off. But while we're on the subject, let's remember that Manmohan Singh's daughter, Amrit, back in 2007 or whatever, she took on a case. She's a human rights lawyer, very, very like Manmohan Singh himself, and like his wife, like his other kids. These are very smart people who, they've risen by their own merit. And Amrit, she took on the case of some horrible Al-Qaeda crazy nut job who, and I think there was a case which went on for 10 years, 12 years, but of course nothing happened. But, that case made the life of some lawyers in the Navy or whatever, JAG or whatever it's called, miserable. It didn't help anybody at all. It was a complete waste of everybody's time. But it showed that human rights are a nuisance and that enough of that bullshit. And I think now under Biden, a poor chap, that God knows how old he is, but by the time he reaches the ripe age of 80, all this will have been rolled back. It'll all be gone. And people like this Rajagopal and Sunita Vishwanathan, I don't know, worthless people. I think under Obama's administration, that this type of stupidity and virtue signaling was rewarded. But it's all going to go. As for Scroll, who is financing it? Omidyar? I don't know. Maybe it's making profit, I don't know. But, Biden has been suggesting that American will start paying those bills. In other words, Biden is going to be the new Soros. American taxpayers are going to do what Soros did. And let's remember that Soros is the man who has spent more billions than anybody else to completely defeat his own purpose and to make himself reliant. Obama, I think, said that American foreign policy consists of doing stupid shit. He did say that my new policy is not to do stupid shit, but the reverse happened. And of course, Biden, we can trust him to do really stupid shit. Anyway, so much for. I am for human rights for Hindus. But for myself, I want bovine rights for myself. I want Hindus to treat me like a cow. Don't kill me. Moo. Moo is just Om, spelt backwards. And don't forget, the holy book of India is Constitution, and it has a directive principle against cow slaughter. Moo! Don't kill me. But don't let me starve either. Buy my books, so I'll have a little money. And I can buy some nice hay and grass, and not that type of grass. But anyway, do buy my books. And a very, very happy 2022 to all of you. From the Assistant Director, Institute of Social Proctology. That is me. Moo, Om spelled backwards.